Awesome. We're back. We got a super cool guest today, Denning. Thanks for doing this.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Glad we caught you while you're in town. Just a little bit about Denning. So Denning and I go way back. It's why, 10 years now, I think.
Yeah, 10 years, maybe longer.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember the first time we met. It was actually in Malaysia.
Yes.
It was at Wild Digital. You remember that?
And you just started AWS, right?
No, I was with another startup then.
Okay.
It was called 123RF.
Yes.
I was actually in the next booth, and I was pitching to Sequoia for like $50 million. Yeah, and really funny. And you were like actually in the next booth. I didn't know who you were.
Yeah.
And after that ended, the guy, he's Peter Kemp.
That's Peter Kemp.
Peter Kemp. Yeah. So he said, hey, meet my buddy, meet this, and that was you, right? And you had just started a new fund then.
Seed Plus.
Seed Plus, right? All going to start, and you just, pretty much just printed your card.
Yeah.
So I was one of the first recipients. Little did I know that, down the road that we would become colleagues and then ex-colleagues.
And ex-colleagues.
Right.
At the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
And then...
It's a good story. I like it.
Yeah. And then as we talked, we realized. So I had a startup before, and my first hire, a fractional CTO, was someone that you hired, Fajar. From Coprol,
Yes.
right? Yahoo time.
It's a small world.
Small world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So full circle here on your podcast. Happy to be here.
Yeah, that's great. I forgot about the Farjar connection.
Yeah.
Farjar was the founder of Coprol, which was I helped do an acquisition. Yahoo bought Coprol.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Which is like we'll get one of them on sometime because a lot of people forget this as a stat, which some of the PE guys use this. I think Gowdy used this at TPG, and then later he went on to Jungle. Is the very first acquisition of a Southeast Asian company by a public Fortune 500 thing in the startup thing is actually Yahoo buying Coprol. And you'll see some charts where a lot of people show, not necessarily literally, but it kind of kicked off where you see the whole startup ecosystem kind of starting to boom in Indonesia and things like that.
What year was it?
I'll have to look. I'll put it in the 1990 something.
Oh my gosh.
It's a long while ago. And it's actually before the whole Indonesian scene in my mind is as busy as today is that, right?
Yeah.
So rewind a little bit. I think that what's going to be fun about Denning is this is probably going to be one of the ones where we dig into the ecosystem a little bit from a pure just startups and entrepreneurship and funds, which I think will be fun. So Denning, long list of companies you worked for. I think you mentioned 123RF. You've been in Malaysia most of the time. You've worked at AWS. You worked at Carsum. Carsum's, I still think, considered the largest startup in Malaysia.
Probably only like legit unicorn.
Yeah.
Well, legit. Yeah. Only in unicorn. Yeah.
In Malaysia, which is a big one. Now you're a partner at the GenAI Fund, which we'll talk about that because we need to all learn about it. So you've been around the block, which is fantastic. We're going to start off being a little bit controversial because that's what we do here.
We're trying to.
So you always, and again, when I say this, folks, I am not being negative on the ecosystem, but I think it's good to talk and be transparent because it helps everybody, and that's what we're trying to do here. So when you look around the Southeast Asian ecosystem, Singapore is always known to be like the biggest from a pure capital perspective, maybe not from sheer numbers, and then second is Indonesia, probably from sheer numbers and capital, and then you kind of have this rolling thing of 1 year Malaysia's bigger, 1 year somebody says Thailand's bigger. You keep hearing these, it's the year of somebody. I won't say which from a country perspective, but in reality, nothing's really changed. It's Singapore, it's Indonesia, and really bringing up third place is Malaysia practically every year, even though it bounces around, right? Given that you've worked in a bunch of countries, right? You've worked in Vietnam now, you've worked in Korea, you've worked outside even Asia, right? You have stayed in Malaysia, and now you're working on this button. What keeps you in Malaysia, and why do you feel like it's the place for you to be, given that there's places that have bigger, maybe more opportunity for you personally?
Good question. So I think when I returned to Malaysia initially from Shanghai and then from Singapore, folks were, my friends were all leaving Malaysia, going elsewhere. And I think, especially now, for me, what brought me home literally was, because I wanted to be close to family, right? My parents, right? So that literally brought me home, kept me there for quite some time.
And that is important.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I started to notice, the world changing, people being able to do things from wherever they are, right? Remote work, for example, making things happen. The world is so small. And COVID, of course, accelerated that. And I'm seeing it now accelerating even more in GenAI. It's one of the topics where, I think a lot of governments that we speak to, when they try to grow ecosystems, of course, they try to bring the best talent to whichever country and keep them in, right? But I think that model has kind of like changed, and it's changing. Every startup, most startups I know, especially when they are a little bit bigger, they look to find talent from wherever they are. And this whole remote team, as one team, is a real thing. And I think that governments should embrace it. They should think about how to build the best product rather than just being able to bring people in and keep them in. Yeah. So, and I kind of fell into that space before all this, took place. I knew I could make change from wherever I was. Amazon is an example. When I joined Amazon, one of the sticking points was that I was based in Malaysia. And when I made it, I kind of insisted I had to be here for family reasons. And I convinced them that I could still do the job. It's a regional job anyway. They made an exception, right? And once that exception was made, many others just follow suit.
Yeah. Andrew started building the team with people around the region, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I think it really doesn't matter where you are, but you must be very clear about what you want to build. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. And do you feel like Malaysia's getting better in that regard, as from an ecosystem specific to startups and stuff like that? I
think so. I kind of share this also my insights from when I first joined Amazon. So one of the benefits of being there is I have access to all this data, and I can see truly what startups are doing, the ones which are coming, how many there really are. And at the time when I joined, probably Malaysia was ranked number 3 or 4, I would say. And by the time I left, shortly before I left, we actually did a ranking exercise internally, and we pulled all kinds of data to justify that rank. And Malaysia fell down to like 6, 7. Yeah, so that was from a Malaysian's point of view, that wasn't really nice to see, right? And there were many reasons for that. You could also see that for a good number of years, funding just literally stood still, except for a few big rounds. Other than that, it kind of stood still. But fast forward to today, I'm starting to see a lot of big things happen. I think GenAI is going to be a big game changer. But also, I think that this fascination with startup count, for example, is something that's going to be something of the past. Every country likes to say, "Oh, I've got the most startups in this country." Right? Malaysia recently said, one of the ministries set a goal of wanting to create 900 AI startups by 2026, something like that, right? And I think all these numbers are not going to mean very much when GenAI itself is going to be able to create startups themselves. Yeah. So you can kind of like tell an LLM agent, right? Say, hey, I want to have how many of these startups, blah, blah, blah. I want to build it, clone it against this, run, go, right? And then what does it mean? The number of startups. So I think a new definition is needed, and kind of like new special lists, who who
Yeah,
is really a
like,
startup.
and I've
yeah.
always argued because like I have this bone to pick with, scale ups versus startups
Yeah.
and how it like there needs to be something about building good businesses,
Correct,
like successful businesses,
Yes.
whatever metric we want to apply to that,
Right.
because we can build thousands of new things. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean they're successful businesses.
Yeah,
right?
it's just a vanity number.
Yeah.
Right. And all these like startup counts, people always celebrate like the successes. How many startups came in the system, how many startups falls into various lists, but they don't actually look into startups who have just gone dormant or they've shut. Right. They don't track that as closely.
Yeah.
So the numbers are kind of like inflated, and I think I think they're coming to mean less and less for me. Yeah.
Fair.
For me, coming from Israel, and we have also, lots of metrics around, startups and numbers. And for entrepreneurs, the way they look at that, not from government perspective or even like funds, it's they trying to see the velocity of how many startups have been acquired.
Yes.
I'm not talking about even IPOs.
Yeah.
Just, bought by company,
Yes.
did X amount of money and did their next startup, same team.
Yeah.
And this is a metric we like to track,
Yeah.
as entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very important metric. Very, very good one. I'll love to talk about that a bit more later. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go back in time a bit.
Yeah.
Because we went fast forward,
Sure.
with your history
We went
and
fast.
AWS. But I look at your background, and I don't know you as Michael knows you as a friend for 10 years, and I saw your journey. Yeah, you started as a lawyer, then few startups, and then a fund.
Yeah.
If I'm going back, if you had a plan, some people do have a plan. I usually have a plan. I'm a very strange guy. Does it reflect your plan when you were younger?
I would say no, probably not. Right. So unlike you, I do like to have plans, but most of the things that have happened to me, I literally fell into it. So probably the first thing for me when I started off as a litigator, so a lawyer that goes to court all the time, right?
Yeah.
A few times a week, going, my lord, my lord, my lord. This,
Did you
right?
enjoy that?
I did. It's really testing. You stand in front of a court.
That was in Malaysia?
In Malaysia. It's adversarial.
You don't have to
right?
wear the wig there, right?
Not the wig, but you got to be pretty formal.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
And then you have opponents. You have a judge. Right? You have to have everything at your fingertips. It's really good training, and you're kind of making law, on the fly.
Yeah.
Some things that happen become law, right? So, I liked it a lot. And then I took a trip to my first trip to China, and that led me to really open up my eyes and say, hey, I really want to work here. It's nothing like what I thought it was.
What year was it?
That was 2004. So 2005, I was in China, right?
And I say anything pre-Olympics is like a much different China, right?
Very
Like,
different.
That's the reason I asked.
Yeah, very different.
2008 is it's like pre-Olympic China, post this is very different, especially in Beijing, right?
Yeah. So it was like it was just not long after China and WTO, the whole world was coming to China to open up stuff. So I was really in the thick of it, and when I went there, obviously I couldn't be a litigator, right, in China, and so I became a commercial lawyer. But what kind of commercial lawyer? And I was so fortunate that in my firm, so the firm was a TMT firm, right? So everything on technology then.
Yeah.
And one of my very first clients was this very interesting startup called Qunar, right? So Qunar was at that time, it was founded by three founders, Fritz Demopoulos, you might know him, Douglas Koo, and Chen Chao. Right? So these three guys, one Chinese, one Malaysian, and one American, right? And they were they're raising a first round, Series A. First Series A, they owed a bunch of money. They basically flat broke at that time, and they really needed to get this deal through, right? And there were a few investors, if I recall, Mayfield, GSR Ventures were some of them, and that particular deal really opened up my eyes. I was so fascinated by not just the work the work was work was work. It was a great experience, but I was really fascinated by how this, this small team was able to do so much, and just scramble, hustle. It was new to me, this hustling experience, and I realized then that hey, maybe this is a world that I much prefer to be in. So that kind of planted the seed. So, and then so one thing fell into another, and leaving China again, leaving China, I still went into law, but still very much in startup space, right? So VCs, PEs, working with entrepreneurs, founders. I really love that.
Yeah.
I think that kept me sane while working through deals, looking at businesses, learning deeply about them, but always feeling envious because every deal is like a Kodak moment. You go really hard, you get to know everything, and you close the deals just a moment in time in that startup's journey, and then they're off, they're gone. So I always felt that I wish I could have been part of that team. I wish I built this myself, so I think one thing led to another. And so when the opportunity came to for me to join 123RF, right? I had actually accepted another job with a big tech, and I met the founder a couple days before I joined the big tech, and it took me 10 seconds to say, this is where I want to be. And that was my first foray into joining a startup. So one thing led to another. AWS was the same thing. So the stuff that I did at 123RF, it showed me so many things. You just do it with a lot of sincerity. And you go about it the best way you think you can, and it leads to various opportunities. So AWS was that same event. So Wild Digital.
Yeah.
Right. So I bumped into.
Do they still do it every year, Wild Digital?
No, they don't. They don't. Yeah.
It was a good event.
It's a good event. Yeah.
It used to be a tech conference. It was the Catcher Group.
Yes.
Which the Catcher Group's still there and everything, but they ran a KL-based conference for startups and PE, but for the broader. And I actually really enjoyed it because it was more around the ecosystem conference than the one where everybody has a booth and shows up.
It was pitched very differently.
Yeah.
Right. You had a good mix of startups and also a good mix of I'll say more matured
but it's quite famous that were you at the one where Najib the PM speaks and it's months later and he's caught on this scandal thing. It's only months later, so he's the guest VIP speaker at the event, and then it's 3 months later. He's for the 1MD.
Yeah, but Catcha definitely had, they were able to pull all these.
Yeah, they got some great VIPs from around the region to come in.
Prime ministers, different prime ministers actually have gone to the event, right?
Interesting.
And that that same event where I first met you was when I first met Lawrence.
Okay.
Yeah. So Lawrence was just he had just joined AWS. AWS was completely new.
Lawrence is the country manager for Malaysia. He's now the country manager for Microsoft Malaysia.
Correct.
It's a small pool of country managers that go
bring
around.
Lawrence maybe.
We should. So one thing led to another. I met Lawrence there. So I met. So Peter Camps was also from AWS. Small world. And
so we'll just label all these people because I think this is fun. Peter Kemps is at Sequoia, right? Actually, Peak, but he's based in the Netherlands, comes back and forth now. And Peter Kemps in the region's kind of known for being one of the first guys to kick off the whole startup ecosystem from AWS perspective. Because back in the day, AWS is the first one to kind of focus on startups. Peter Kemps was the first guy actually doing that.
Right? So full circle. So as I was pitching Peter, I recall this very clearly. So he was asking me questions so I was telling him about some new products that 123RF was building. And so he asked me, how did you go about building this? Did you work backwards from it? So I was like, work backwards? What do you mean? Right? So working backwards is one of the methodologies that Amazon uses a lot. And so he started coming up with all these things about Amazon that was kind of new to me, but I found it fascinating, right? And then that was downstairs. And when I went upstairs for lunch, standing my friend, Jeanette, friend of mine, I saw these two blokes walking in like full suit. You know, it's a startup event. Everyone's wearing t-shirts.
Yeah, t-shirt with
And
your,
you had
with
these
your
two guys
franchise, yeah.
that just stood out like sore thumbs. They were carrying their food. They didn't know where to go, where to sit. And it kind of looked miserable. So I motioned to them and I said, hey, you want to put your plate down here? I had no clue who they were. So they sat down. They didn't sit down. They stood up. They put their plates down. And then they introduced themselves as the first 2 employees of AWS. And I had just had that session with Peter, so it was fresh in my mind. So I immediately launched into, hey, like...
Is that Shane? And who is it?
It was Lawrence and Patrick.
Okay, the local guy. Okay.
Yeah, local guy. So Patrick, became country manager of...
Did you tell them about the
Google.
suits at a conference as being out of place, or you left that alone?
No, I implied that. I said, obviously you guys are not startup guys, right? And then I said, and you're coming here because AWS is all about startups. Then they said, yeah. And so we got to talking. I started asking him questions about the 6-pager, and various Amazon things. And Lawrence was saying, how is it that you know more about AWS than me, right? So I said, well, I'm new. I literally just got to it, and then I started to research about it as I was walking upstairs. It was just, very fascinating to me. So it was kind of fresh. And then, so I actually volunteered to Lawrence to run a few dinners, a few events where I'll pull. So I said, okay, Lawrence, if you're willing to pick up the tab, then I will arrange.
Which AWS is always great about that. Like, just here's the credit card, go do a dinner. Yeah.
Correct. So I say I'll put together like 15 influencers in the startup world in Malaysia. We run a few of these. And after these sessions, if you get to know them well, you know everyone, right? So he said, okay, let's do it. So that very same week, we had the first session, so I pulled, friends along to that first event.
Yeah.
We had a gala time, and by the end of it, we decided to call it the AWS Supper Club. So fast forward like a couple of years, I was still 123 RF. I get a call one day from Lawrence, right? And he said, I always come back to, thinking about the stuff that you did, and just checking if I was interested in joining AWS itself. And I was thinking at that time of trying something new. So timing worked right. And the rest is history, right? And another interesting trivia was my first interview. Andrew actually interviewed me.
Yes.
Yeah, Branges.
I gotta get him on.
Yeah, and he said in the first interview, he said, we used to run something here that I would really want to start again, and we call it the AWS Supper Club. So perfect icebreaker for me. So a lot of things I think in the startup world, and that's why I love it, is it comes full circle. You never know what you do today, is going to come back, right? The world will speak back to you. Just like how, we're having this podcast today with Michael. You just never know. And that's the amazing thing about being in the startup
we'll
world.
throw another little date marker in because it's kind of funny. I think AWS launched Malaysia today, the Malaysia region, which is the first in all the hyperscalers to be in Malaysia, which I think is a testament to what's happening in Malaysia, which is...
And GenAI as well.
Yeah, which is great.
Which actually a good segue to how you
Your
get
shirt.
into to a fund. Startups, big tech, lawyer, fund.
So again, kind of unplanned. I definitely, when I was representing funds in the past, right? So I used to represent quite a few number of funds. And
As a lawyer.
Yeah. I never once thought, I want to be that guy. Not once. So definitely unplanned. So I was at Qasem, right? And then I left Qasem, and one day I was literally just mucking around. I've been looking at GenAI, fascinated with the technology, love technology, and a couple of other ex-Amazonians, friends. We just started to get talking about GenAI and where's the money going, and who's investing in what. And we were really curious as to why there weren't really that many investments in this part of the world from the GenAI perspective. And then we said, if no one's going to do it, why don't we do it? And so that kind of that was, just this year, in the earlier part of the year.
Yeah.
So one thing led to another. We started to explore different structures. We initially approached it from a plain vanilla fund kind of perspective. We said, okay, we'll start small, just like startups, start small, get it going first, right? So the moment we got it going, we said, hey, we really got to become domain experts. So we're generalists, but we needed to have a certain level of domain expertise.
Yeah.
So we went around, working backwards again from startups. So we built a whole database of over 500 GenAI startups. And we decided that through this database...
Regional ones or just global?
Regional. Mostly
it.
regional. I'll say 98% regional, right? And no one else...
region to you is Asia, Southeast Asia?
ASEAN.
So you're sticking
ASEAN.
to that.
ASEAN.
Just
kind of-
ASEAN. Yes, just ASEAN.
900 is a nice number.
Yeah, 500.
500. Sorry.
Yeah. So we decided that we need to find out more from the startups themselves. So we started to run various surveys, and when the survey results came back, it was very informing. It informed us about a lot of things, and we said, hey, we shouldn't keep this data to ourselves. Why don't we write about it? And that kind of led to the report that we are launching, and that's why I'm here today. We have an event later today. We're going to talk about some of the findings of the report, and at the end,
when does it get launched? Today? Is it?
Today is various sessions. I'll talk about some of the key things that from the report itself.
Yeah.
So the final report will only be released at the end.
Give
of
us
the
one
roadshow.
little nugget. What's one little stat you guys have learned that you were surprised by?
I guess one stat that I was really surprised by is the number of B2B startups in GenAI.
Yeah.
So, if a pre-GenAI world, pre-COVID world especially, most startups that we see and invest into in ASEAN are B2C. B2C, by far. B2B,
I like hearing that.
Yeah.
Continue on.
Yeah, B2B was that, that unsexy cousin,
Yeah.
that, people don't pay much attention to.
Yeah.
But B2B guys are really happy because, they're dealing with, really fat margins, right? They're profitable from very early on. They hardly go unicorn status, but, they were happy where they were, but most were B2C. Now flip over to GenAI. We were really surprised that, almost 60% of them of the startups are pure B2B, and almost 40% are B2B led with some aspects of B2C.
Yeah.
So you put them together, 92%, were B2B essentially, which was very surprising to me. So that's one interesting nugget. Yeah.
I think that's a good trend though, right?
Yeah.
I think without naming names, I think Southeast Asia's kind of hit a B2C bubble, both in the public and private markets, and then it's kind of been the air's let out, you know. But I think there's challenges in B2B.
A lot of challenges.
We could do a whole podcast on that, but I think that's good. And for the fund perspective, so give us a few things. You guys are based all over the place, but it's like Vietnam, Malaysia.
So the team is principally based out from Vietnam, right? So
also ex-AWS people.
Also
I think.
ex-AWS, right? So
Surprise.
AWS mafias all over the place.
Surprise.
Yeah, we kind of get together, and
It's good.
I think it's more like a mindset thing. Like we're all thinking the same thing or similar things at the same time, right? And then we just like do
There's
things.
something to the AWS leadership principles that even if you don't agree with them all, and I feel very fortunate to have attended pre-COVID. AWS would have its monster sales event, which I think it was in Chicago. You went too, right?
Yeah, Chicago.
And this is a little inside baseball, kind of before the startup segment happened, which we helped work on.
Yeah.
And there's like 21,000 people or something.
Wow.
Right? So breakfast would be like 7,000. It was crazy. You could meet all these cool people, right?
Yeah.
But I felt super fortunate to go to one of the sessions, and it's Andy Jassy going through his take on the leadership principles live.
Okay.
And I was like on the third row or something. And like, put away all the like biblical feelings you have about it or religious, because some people do that. I'm not that. The leadership principles are legit and they align people.
Yeah.
And I have stuck with a lot of them myself, both personally and in business and because they work. And I think you're right. There's something to this. I don't have to explain them I'd have to probably explain them to you, but I don't have to explain them to you. And the working backwards, the willingness to have conflict, it's just all like innate to people that have worked there. And then throw in the fact that if you worked for Vandris, you probably had to write a few docs, which I'm in that camp as well. That's the whole narrative thing. Andrew is really good at those. So there's just something about that. So is the core team all ex-AWS?
No. Yeah,
Just
core
two
team,
of you?
yes. Core team, yes. So myself and Laura, right?
Yeah.
So Laura is based in Vietnam.
Yeah.
I'm based in KL. The rest of the team members are also based in Vietnam, so between Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi.
Yeah.
But the fund is actually structured out from Singapore.
Got it.
Yeah, so that's how
And
we
making
that's how we
Southeast Asia
started.
investments.
That's how we started. Yeah,
Got
but
it.
it's only been 4 months in, actually, very
Nice.
new. But from 4 months ago, so much has changed for us. You know, as a result of all the things that we found out, our strategy has changed actually. Yeah, so
Yeah.
there are a lot of things that we're going to be, putting into place, right? I'll say, as you know, after this whole roadshow has ended, yeah, we're going to put in place quite a few different changes to what we thought it was going to be before. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you disclose like the amount of the fund, or it's like
Yeah, I mean, happy to. So the fund started off, it's a modest fund, targeting pre-seed and seed. So it's $10 million. Yeah.
nice.
Pre-seed and
Very
seed,
nice.
Southeast Asia, kind of first checks.
Yes, correct. First checks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Average
So-
ticket 100,000,
Yeah.
200.
Yeah. 100,
GenAI
200,
Fund,
250.
GenAI
Yeah.
Fund.vc. What's the URL so everybody knows how to find you?
.ai.
.ai, GenAI Fund.ai.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Well, dude, I think building a fund's like building a startup, maybe even harder
Yeah.
because you have to go raise.
Yeah.
But having been there with the Seed Plus journey, it's exciting. Learn a lot, and I think it's great to see another entrant into the market. So
Yeah. So, to our knowledge, we're probably the only ones who is focused on GenAI exclusively.
yeah.
Right? Even among existing funds that we speak to, very few have a mandate, for GenAI specifically. Probably none. I'll say none have a specific mandate. Some of them are thinking about it.
Yeah.
But it's very early days, and it's part of the reason why I think the report is going to be important to kind of share very candidly.
And when's that launched officially? This week or?
So we're going to release the full report at the last event that we have in Vietnam.
Got it.
So we had a pre-launch, soft launch in Vietnam last month, and then or the month before, last month, yeah. And then the first launch actually is today, Singapore formal launch, and then
Congrats.
we're going to after this is Malaysia, after that is Bangkok, and then after that is Indonesia, Philippines, and then
So you're hitting all the countries, and then
all the countries. And at the end of the Vietnam event, we'll release the full report.
yeah. And out of the 500 number, one more stat. What's the top location?
The top location is Singapore.
Singapore still.
Yeah. So by startup count, if you give value to that, so by startup count, Singapore is like I think they're about 46, 44, 46%.
But that's just from an incorporation standpoint. They could, or is it actually location?
So that's where the startups identify themselves
Okay,
to be from.
got it.
Yeah.
Singapore's
good
still kind of
question.
winning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
And B2B.
a very close second is Vietnam. So Vietnam is 30-odd%, right? And then after that, there's a big fall to the third one, which is Indonesia at 12%. Yeah. So 12%. So Indonesia has kind of been a little bit slow off the blocks, I'll say.
Yeah.
They're like a sleeping giant.
Well, I would say Indonesia's back to that. Everybody wakes up and thinks they should do B2C because you're in this market with 300 million people.
Correct.
Right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Going back to the investments, and now you have the fund,
Yeah.
and you starting the roadshow, and I'm sure it's gonna be very cool for you. Excited for you.
Very excited. Yeah.
Can you share a bit about your investment strategy, looking at the early stage,
Yeah.
seed, pre-seed, because I'm very interesting to hear.
Yeah. So when we started off, we kind of modeled ourselves like most other pre-seed and seed, right? This was before we realized that the GenAI space was so dominated by B2B startups.
Yeah.
At least for now. And so I think the strategy was really, to try to understand the space well. And while the scene is not competitive, because most VCs are not kind of like thinking it's too new, they're not familiar with technology, they're kind of staying away. We are going in. We took the contrarian view. So we thought, okay, we're going to have, really good pickings of like the best startups out there, right? Coming in at pre-seed, mainly pre-seed actually, pre-seed and seed. So small checks, like you said, 100,000, 200,000, 250,000. So that's where we're thinking. We're thinking of ending with, a portfolio of about 30 startups, right? Roughly 30 startups, the rest being expenses and stuff. And then, the next 18, 24 months show some initial traction as the space grows and continue to fundraise. So that's what we thought in the beginning.
Okay.
Right. So fast forward to to today, we that very point that I raised about B2B startups and your point about Israel. So that was actually very, very interesting for me. So one of the things that we think is going to happen, is that in this B2B space, and given the whole attention, like for the very first time, I'll say enterprises are more interested in like GenAI and AI than ever before, right? So it's not just speaking about it, talking about it, they're actually budgeting for it. They're putting money into it, right? The processes are still slow to onboard startups. That's one of the challenges they've got to fix.
And this is part of B2B?
Yes, that's part of B2B.
Sales, I guess.
Right. So these are the pains and problems which that we are seeing now. So you have a slew of B2B startups that really need to get traction, really need to get product market fit with enterprises who are moving too slowly, but who themselves want to be in the AI Gen AI space.
Yeah.
So we are hoping to kickstart that whole,
Nice.
And literally put them together. So other than just onboarding startups, I've been on the other side, right? So as on the enterprise side, I've been on the accelerator side, the CVC side, and very quickly, enterprises being who they are, they will start thinking, hey, if we, now we're using them, we like them. Maybe we could also build something similar, or maybe we could invest into them, or maybe we could acquire them.
Correct.
Right. So that whole thought process will definitely happen with a lot of enterprises, and we actually anticipate there's going to be a lot of interest in acquisitions, right? Which is what you said about Israel, and that's a good model to back on. I might actually just use that, right? So we anticipate this is going to happen a lot, and we also anticipate that a lot of B2B startups in the Gen AI space, they're not going to have the same ambitions as previous startups. Previous startups, a lot of them, you ask them, what's your goal? I want to be a unicorn. I want to list on NASDAQ and NYSE, right? So that story might come again, someday. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon,
Yeah, I don't think it's
right? And in terms of the exit cycle, a lot of startups now, when we speak to them, they want to build something amazing that people love and probably exit within 3 years. Many of them are thinking that way, right? If it continues to be a great business, they happily persist with it, continue to grow the business. But if they, received a great offer within 3 years, they would sell. They won't feel too much about it, right? They'll be happy with it. And on the flip side, with the enterprises, this is kind of like their way of like accelerating the process of getting into AI and Gen AI. And I think a lot of acqui hires are going to happen, right? Also, acqui hires are going to happen a lot. And so this whole space is going to develop with a lot of expertise behind it, which is where we think that we can come in. So, my background, right? Having done a lot of these acquisitions, investments myself, right?
Yeah.
And so we're thinking, hey, like other than just plain vanilla investing, maybe there are various other professional services that we can build around this VC that we have, right? So not just thinking about it from a straightforward basis. No, so putting together, like really going deep, like maybe even building a Gen AI platform and tool that does this matchmaking. So imagine a world where, from the very conception of a Gen AI idea, some Gen AI product, who your potential customers, potential investors, potential acquirers, would be. You say, I want to build this. You put it into you prompt it, right? You prompt the Gen AI platform, and it will tell you this whole universe of folks who would be interested into you. So something like that. We're thinking about things like that.
Try to like build the whole thing around like this
Correct.
might be your customer, this might be your acquirer.
Correct.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, let the potential customer acquirer know as well. So making that whole, so building an ecosystem around it, I think that's another role that we're going to have, and all the kinds of work that's going to come from that. Even like talent scouting, I'll say, like on the acqui-hire side, right? Building out accelerators for enterprises, like thinking through their innovation processes, putting the first seeds of their, the CVCs, getting them as LPs, venture building together. I think that this space is going to develop a lot in this way, right? And so there's a lot of these opportunities. Of course, the M&As, so M&As at all stages, from early stage to, Series B, Series C maybe, right, guys. So all these stages, I think M&As are going to happen over the next 2 years. I think, it's going to pick up.
It's very common. A lot of things, maybe we can take it offline. I'm thinking about things that I maybe gonna share afterwards. Like very common investment strategy is to focus on 4 matrices when you see a startup. I like to call them the 4 T's. Yeah, it's the time, it's the tech, it's the team, and
TAM.
And the TAM. Yeah, sorry, thank you.
I guess.
Yeah, and the TAM.
Yeah.
I think in GenAI we understand the market. Yeah. We don't need to see the slide with the TAM. It's fine. Yeah. Where are you gonna put your weight bigger, on the team or the tech? Because for me, when you have an unfair advantage with the tech, this is something that need to think about how you're gonna calculate the weights. How you see that?
Good question. So I think for us, and we talked about this among team members, right? Which are the areas that are most important to us? Maybe I can start with the TAM actually. So why the TAM is very important in GenAI space. So between the different the world of GenAI startups, on the one hand you have you've heard of this term probably of wrappers. Yeah. Right, so wrappers are thin UI UX built on top of existing technology, not really coming up with something entirely new, but giving a new experience anyway in terms of accessing it. So you have this world of wrappers that address a horizontal market, so they kind of serve everyone. So say for example a simple photo editor, GenAI photo editor, anyone can use it, right? It doesn't matter which industry.
Correct.
And then on the other hand, you have more vertical focused niche B2Bs, which solve specific industry issues, specific workflows within enterprises. You could even be like a med tech, just focus on imaging, CT scans, stuff like that. Something very, very specific. On the other hand, the problem with that is and as you would know, so horizontal startups address a much bigger TAM. The whole world can use it. It doesn't matter who, right? A vertical startup addresses only a specific use case. And in this part of the world, are there enough of these specific use cases that will use you, right? So the challenge then becomes a TAM issue. And the other interesting nugget from what we found out is almost 80% of the startups who are into B2B are on the vertical side today for ASEAN, right? So we actually anticipate that, and most of them, another nugget, 67% of them are targeting global as their go-to-market from day one. So you can
which is a good change, right?
Which is a good change.
They're gonna have to, right?
Yeah, which is a good change. But the challenge is, can you imagine building out a startup from say Malaysia, anywhere in ASEAN?
Yeah.
You're just starting out. You don't have full product market fit yet, and you immediately want to go toe to toe, trying to land big contracts in the States.
Yeah,
is very, very challenging, right? Next to impossible, I'll say.
It's impossible.
Yeah, impossible. Very challenging, and most of them are thinking along these lines, right? Yeah. So we see a lot of problems that that startups are going to struggle with. So on the TAM issue, right? So I think. We prefer the vertical startups for us as a fund, but which ones are the ones that we think are going to make it, and which are the ones that we think we can help to make it happen for them. So these is kind of a sweet spot for us at the moment, right? So this is the area that we are looking at, and why a lot of startups are choosing the vertical is because of defensibility issues, right? So the rate by which technology is changing in the GenAI space is scary. It's
scary.
Too fast.
Scary. I mean, you might be building your heart out, on the horizontal side, right? And with the most unique experience, and then a new version gets released that completely eclipses you, goes beyond, and charges next to nothing for it.
then you need to pivot.
You need to pivot really quickly.
It's tough. It's tough.
You know, who would you place a bet on, right? Are you able to out pivot? You know, like, so there are many strategies, and like we can talk about that later. There are many strategies that startups are going about trying to tackle this. They know the problem, they're tackling ahead of time, but it's still a challenge. So back to the vertical.
Yeah.
So that's where we are looking at a lot. Like the startups who are really solving critical needs, right? And have the nuance and the know-how to win stakeholders within enterprises and larger SMEs, like locally, regionally, globally.
Yeah.
Right? They have that whole setup. We like those, like for the time being.
Good.
And because of the struggles that we anticipate a lot of these startups are going to go through, and despite building like great stuff, this is going to be a really nice playground for enterprises to consider acquiring them, or acquiring. Another reason why we think these type of things will happen. And it's still early days. The market is developing itself.
Yeah.
But we do think that there's going to be a lot of growing pains and a lot of opportunities at the same time. Yeah. So that's on the TAM. So seeing these, you mentioned about pivot, right? So coming to the team. So we also ran another data point on how often do startups in GenAI pivot, right? So 92% of the startups are pre-seed seed for GenAI today.
Yeah.
Of the ones that we've surveyed, right? And of these, how many from between pre-seed to seed, for example, most of the startups, 75% of startups have pivoted up to 4 times.
Wow.
Yeah. So, that tells you something about how they are thinking about technology, adapting, reacting to technology. And I think it's a very important skill set. Founders who are able to pivot quickly, to learn from experience, and just move really, really fast. So this space, I think the ability to iterate, pivot is very key.
Yeah.
If you're a founder who's just stuck in a product, I mean, it's okay to love what you build, but don't get too obsessed with it.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in GenAI.
Yeah, especially in GenAI, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me, ultimately it's going to come down to the team and the founders in the early stage.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of them know they might be made obsolete very quickly, but they want to build out of experience. They want to learn the space. These guys we can work with, right? We can work with them. We can, if we believe that the team is able to, understand the market, willing to experiment, right? These guys, we like generally. Yeah. So
I think it's
important.
a great opportunity.
Yeah.
For entrepreneurs that listen to us, and hopefully they know that they have an opportunity with you. And I like what you said.
I'm
It's
looking
great.
forward to see the report as well.
Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit, because we're going to title of the podcast Generalists.
Yeah.
How has being a generalist kind of impacted your life and career? Because I tend to identify you as one, given all the different things you've done, but wondering how you feel about it personally.
I think as a generalist, for me, it's helped me to be very open-minded, right? So that's one very key thing. When I was a lawyer, legal by itself is quite a specialist, job, right? But we take on, all kinds of cases every day. We are literally solving everyone else's problem that they don't want to solve themselves. And in order to do that, we have to go deep with each particular client, each particular case, each particular startup. Every fundraising round, we've got to really understand the customer, not just do the deal, And I think in addition to that, to like young lawyers or whatever else you're doing, don't get too bogged down by just the details of getting the job done. Take a genuine interest. Cultivate that from a young. And if you are a generalist, and you're able to cultivate an interest, you're able to build this expertise where you are always curious and open-minded at the same time. So I think that has helped me a lot, even with like fundraising. So like looking at different startups, everyone's doing different things. So whether you're going to spend 2 minutes or 10 minutes or half an hour with each startup, you've got to give it that undivided attention. You might be a generalist, but give it that undivided attention. Really empathize think about it from their point of view, from the customer point of view, and I think it will help you in, you'll be able to go far in like at least getting a semblance of what they're trying to build, why they're building it, the kind of pains and like what they're trying to solve. So being a generalist, open-mindedness, curiosity, I think it's helped me in that way.
Got it.
Yeah,
that's good advice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You're now based in Malaysia, and you're very close to the ecosystem.
Yeah,
it's your home. What do you think? Maybe about one thing that's gonna change the trajectory of the startup ecosystem in Malaysia.
It's a very difficult one.
I'm
putting you on the
to,
spot.
Yeah.
You've been down there a long time, right?
Yeah.
When I was when I joined AWS in that role, it was as an ecosystem builder, right? And a lot of the countries that I was put in charge of were like very emerging countries. So like Vietnam then, right? Cambodia, like Laos, Myanmar, and Pakistan, for example. Very early stages of cloud, and maybe not super early in startups, but very early in a lot of things. And I always saw myself in the role as a startup nation builder. Like everywhere I'll go, that has been kind of my mantra. Is I've got two mantras. So one is when people ask me why do you do what you do, I said like I'm just so psyched up when people succeed, when startups succeed. So my single goal, if I forget everything else, is to make sure that you succeed in any way, anyhow that I can help you. That's one. And extrapolating on that, by proxy, I want that for everyone. And by extension, so a success of each startup, if they really do well, has a great multiplier effect on the nation. And it's very impactful. So I always saw it as a way to build a nation. So I always thought about it from a nation building perspective. Coming back to Malaysia, so that segue gave me some time to think. I think if there was one thing, and maybe I'm being a little bit bold by this.
Okay.
Probably is to give me the keys to the kingdom to do pretty much anything I want. And what I would do is I would go Malaysia wide and region wide and global wide to build a team, a crack team, like an A team, build a team that have their hearts in the right place, right? And give me the keys to the kingdom, because if I could do anything, there's so many things in mind. So if there's just one thing, give me the keys to the kingdom. Yeah, I think I could change that course, make a big difference. Yeah.
Do you think to be in cybersecurity?
As well,
because the hackers always wants the key to the kingdom.
Well,
then they can do escalate privileges.
I would vote for giving you the keys.
Yeah. So I mean, like, if you can act without, not wantonly, but like without too much red tape, right?
Yeah.
With a lot of support.
Makes sense.
And just, do more than talk, right? Like, just do, and you already know what needs to be done.
Yeah, I think you could apply that to a lot of these ecosystems because like even, we're in Singapore and I love what they've done, but it's all government led.
Yeah.
You need some sort of like group of superheroes that wear the country's cape that just says, look, I'm going to do everything I can to kind of put this on the map because we're talking about it, we're about to evangelize it. We're not, there's no program that like, I think that's an interesting concept because it's, and I think it's improving in Malaysia. And I think but it's kind of like, it could be bigger and better.
Yeah.
Right?
I think Malaysia has done some good things recently, especially on the infrastructure end. So they've gotten a slew of, committed investments from everyone. So AWS, Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, ByteDance, all these guys have committed billions, in a tune of billions, right?
Yeah.
So I think the hardware side is definitely ramping up a lot.
Yeah.
It's the soft side, that's got to really pick up as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is hard to nail. So awesome. I think we could do this as always with our guests, longer than we have time for. But we're excited for the fund launch and looking forward to getting the report and maybe having you on later to talk about that. Yeah. So we're going to segue to our closers. And these are the ones we ask all of our guests. So the first one is, what would you now tell your 20-year-old self that, now that you know all that you know, and you could go back in time and have a meeting with your 20-year-old self, what would you say?
It's like a Richard Branson moment.
Yeah.
Good question. Where was I when I was 20? Yeah. I guess one thing I kind of like regret, doing is, so, and when I was a lawyer, I did a lot of that, was being too, I think, bogged down and focused on what's in front of me, like what's literally in front of me, like short-sightedness, like literally in front of me, and not really looking up and looking around at the, like the kind of opportunity at life, really, and what's really happening outside of this piece of paper. So I did a lot of that, like just head down, like billing the hours, right? Like doing a good job, being a good lawyer. I didn't do enough of so I was in China during the best years, in Beijing and Shanghai. And looking back, man, all these opportunities, the roads were paved with gold, literally.
And you're at your desk.
And I was at my desk, and I kind of repeated that at various stages of my life. So I guess doing that and also taking more risks from an early stage. I think early on, especially when you're single, without family, you have no roots, take risks.
I think for all the young people listening, we've only shipped 4 episodes, but I think 90% of the people said, just, and it's not to be stupid. It's just take more risks, take some chances, because you have less things to worry about.
Yeah.
Right? Not with your personal safety, not with your health, but with your opportunities.
Yeah. Correct.
Right?
Go. So.
And none of that is wasted. Whether it turns out or
it's
not,
okay.
It's okay. It all comes together.
Yeah.
Eventually, right? None of that is wasted. But if you don't do it, you never know, and you miss the boat, literally. And that's another reason why we're doing GenAI. We don't want to miss this boat, and we think this boat might never come again. This window of 2 years, this boat sailing is now. So, yeah.
Good.
Awesome. That was good advice. Yeah.
Shifting to something else. What do you do for your wellness, for your physical health? Where do you like to focus on?
Yeah, this topic has been so important recently. Even in Malaysian circles, we've had, unfortunately, in the Malaysian ecosystem startups, we've had 2-3 founders in recent times who just passed away.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty young. I mean, they're not old. Right, so they are in their 30s, oldest 40s, seemingly healthy. Some of them are, they take care of themselves, right? So physical and mental health, definitely not underrated, in the kind of things that we do. So really, really important. So everyone has to do it, I think. It's not just for yourself; it's for the people around you, and also it helps you to do a better job at whatever else that you're doing. Yeah. Anyway.
And what do you do for yourself?
So for me, I actually coach tennis and play tennis.
Nice.
So I do both. I love coaching. I know sometimes I'll have bad days, and I feel I don't have time to coach today. I'm just going to tell the student I got no time because I've got work to do. But then I force myself and I get out there, and when I'm out there and teaching, that side of me that really loves to see people succeed and develop comes alive. I feel so happy. It's both a physical and mental thing for me. And coaching is actually not sedentary. If you do it right, you get a great workout if you do it right. So, I try to coach myself at the same time as I coach, my students. I don't like being passive in coaching. I'm very on the ball. It helps me a lot. So I think I kind of kill two birds with one stone. I coach my kids, I coach other people, some neighbor stuff, like very part-time, of course, but yeah, so coaching and playing tennis, both. This has helped me a lot. So that teaching aspect, I love it.
Nice.
Yeah, helping others. Yeah. Great. Last one. What are you watching, reading, listening to that you would recommend has been useful to others?
Useful?
Maybe not. Maybe just have fun. That's okay
Just
too.
have fun, yeah.
Just have fun. So I'm watching something like now that I just started. I'm just like a few episodes in. I'm watching in bits and pieces 'cause I don't have time. But I really love it because it's quite different. Most of the stuff I watch is in English, right? So it's either American or English or Australian. But this one is in German, right? It's on Netflix. It's this new series called Cleo. It's about this former East German Stasi assassin, right? Who's been wrong, and she wants to find out who wronged her, and she goes on this vendetta thing. Yeah, she's such a character. I love it. Yeah, so Cleo, it clears my mind, makes me laugh. Yeah. So
We'll
watch
check it.
Yeah.
I will
Check it out.
KLEO.
KLEO.
With K.
Yeah.
I'll link to it.
I'm
Awesome.
Cleo Strout. Yeah, so it's really good. Love it.
We'll check it out. Yeah, I think we all need a little escapism, as you call it, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Denning, this is great. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Congrats on the fund.
Thank you so
Looking
much.
forward to the report. Thanks for making time for us.
Yeah, and
Thank you so
thank you for assisting entrepreneurs to succeed, and I think it's an amazing mission.
Yeah.
And thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for involving me.
Yeah. Awesome. We're
Okay.
done.
Thank you. Bye.